During World War II, there was a plant so powerful at creating fertilizer that chemical companies spent decades erasing it from agricultural knowledge. Families across Europe were growing this between their crops and producing more nitrogen than synthetic fertilizers could provide. Soil that hadn't grown food in years suddenly exploded with productivity, and they were doing it without buying a single bag of fertilizer. By 1944, over 80% of victory gardens were using this plant. But the moment the war ended, it disappeared. Agricultural offices stopped recommending it. Seed catalogs removed it, and within 15 years, everyone forgot that infinite fertilizer could be grown instead of bought. Why? Because if people realized they could grow unlimited nitrogen, the fertilizer industry would lose billions. Today, you pay $20 to $50 per bag every season. But during the war, they proved you never needed to. In this video, we're uncovering what they buried and why. Number 1. The white clover nitrogen revolution. The plant wasn't exotic or rare. It was white clover, scientifically known as Trifolium repens. What made it revolutionary wasn't what it took from soil, it was what it gave back. White clover belongs to the legume family, plants with unique biological capability. Their roots form symbiotic relationships with bacteria called rhizobium that live in tiny nodules attached to roots, visible as small white or pink bumps when you dig up a plant. These bacteria perform nitrogen fixation, converting atmospheric nitrogen gas into ammonia compounds that plants can absorb directly. The same nitrogen synthetic fertilizers provide, but produced naturally through biological process, rather than industrial manufacturing. The numbers documented during the war were staggering. 1 square yard of white clover growing for 1 full season fixed approximately 200 to 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre equivalent. A typical vegetable garden requires 100 to 150 pounds per acre per year. White clover produced double that amount. When clover plants died, whether cut down or decomposing naturally at season end, all that fixed nitrogen released directly into soil. The next crop planted had immediate access to abundant nitrogen without any fertilizer application. Military agricultural units tested this extensively. Gardens incorporating white clover showed nitrogen levels at 60 to 80 parts per million. The optimal range for vegetable production, adjacent gardens without clover tested at 15 to 25 parts per million, severely deficient levels requiring fertilizer supplements. The process was entirely self-sustaining. Once established, clover reseeded itself naturally. New plants grew each year without replanting. Each generation fixed more nitrogen, building soil fertility continuously rather than depleting it like conventional crops do. This was survival biology turned into food security. Number 2, the Victory Garden interplanting method. White clover wasn't grown in separate dedicated plots during World War II. It was interplanted directly among vegetable crops, creating a living fertilizer factory that operated continuously while food grew above. The technique was specific and tested across thousands of victory gardens. Clover seed was broadcast between rows of vegetables at planting time. The seed was extremely tiny, approximately 1,500 to 2,000 seeds per gram, so very small quantities covered large areas. A typical application rate was 1 to 2 ounces per 100 square feet. The clover germinated within 7 to 10 days, if soil temperature exceeded 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Initial growth was slow, staying low to the ground while vegetable seedlings established. This prevented competition during critical early growth. The clover acted as living mulch, covering soil surface but not interfering with crop plants. As the season progressed, clover roots spread and began nitrogen fixation. Within 4 to 6 weeks, nitrogen levels in root zone started increasing measurably. Vegetable crops planted in clover understory showed visibly darker green foliage, faster growth rates, and significantly higher yields compared to crops grown in bare soil. Benefits extended far beyond nitrogen alone. The clover canopy suppressed weed germination by blocking light from reaching soil surface. Gardens interplanted with clover required 50 to 70% less weeding labor. The dense root mat prevented soil erosion during heavy rains and reduced soil compaction from foot traffic during harvest activities. Water retention improved dramatically. Clover roots created thousands of tiny channels in soil that improved drainage during wet periods but retained moisture during dry spells. Gardens with clover understory required approximately 30% less irrigation compared to bare soil gardens. One documented British allotment in 1943 showed clover plots producing 47% higher total harvest weight. Number 3. The green manure soil building cycle. Beyond interplanting, white clover served as dedicated green manure in rotation strategies that built soil fertility to levels synthetic fertilizers could never match. This protocol, refined during World War II resource shortages, created soil so rich that crops thrived for multiple years on residual fertility alone without any additional inputs. The rotation cycle followed precise seasonal timing. After harvesting summer crops, typically late August or early September, depending on regional climate, entire garden beds were sown heavily with white clover. The seeding rate for green manure was significantly higher than for interplanting, approximately 4 to 6 ounces per 100 square feet. This thick planting created dense clover mats that covered soil completely within 3 weeks. The clover grew rapidly through fall months, taking full advantage of warm soil temperatures and autumn rainfall patterns. Before first hard freeze arrived, usually late October or November, the clover stands reached 6 to 8 inches in height, with extensive root development reaching 12 to 18 inches deep into soil profile. At this point came the critical management step. The entire clover crop was cut at soil level and left on the surface to wilt for 24 to 48 hours. This wilting period reduced moisture content significantly, preventing anaerobic decomposition problems when incorporated. Then the wilted clover was lightly tilled or hand-dug into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. The incorporated biomass was substantial. A 100 square foot bed with mature clover stand contained approximately 40 to 60 pounds of green plant material. The dry matter weight, roughly 8 to 10 pounds after water removal, contained approximately 3 to 4% nitrogen by weight. This translated to roughly ½ pound of pure nitrogen incorporated per 100 square feet, equivalent to applying 5 pounds of commercial 10-0 synthetic fertilizer. Number 4. The perennial fertility compound effect. What made white clover truly revolutionary wasn't just single-season performance. It was the compounding effect over multiple years that created permanent soil improvement. Unlike annual cover crops that required replanting each season, white clover established as perennial ground cover that returned stronger each year without any additional seeding or maintenance effort. The first-year establishment provided moderate nitrogen fixation, typically 100 to 150 pounds per acre equivalent. Roots were still developing, bacterial nodules were forming, and the plant invested significant energy into spreading rather than maximum nitrogen production. But second-year performance jumped dramatically. Established root systems supported larger bacterial populations. More extensive top growth meant more photosynthesis energy available for nitrogen fixation. Second-year nitrogen production typically reached 250 to 300 pounds per acre. By third and fourth years, mature clover stands fixed between 350 to 400 pounds of nitrogen per acre annually. This exceeded requirements for even the most nitrogen-demanding crops like corn or tomatoes. The excess nitrogen built up in soil organic matter reserves, creating long-term fertility that sustained production even if clover was removed. Documented case studies from wartime European gardens showed remarkable results. One German family garden, tracked over 5 years, showed continuous productivity increases. First year with clover showed 20% yield improvement over previous unfertilized production. Second year increased another 30%. By year 5, total production had nearly tripled compared to pre-clover baseline, using identical crop varieties and management practices. The soil itself transformed physically. Organic matter content, measured at 2.1% before clover introduction, reached 6.8% after 4 years. This dramatic increase improved water holding capacity, nutrient retention, and soil structure. The garden required progressively less irrigation, less weeding, and less pest management as soil health improved. The clover had created a self-sustaining ecosystem. Number 5. The post-war chemical industry takeover. The suppression of white clover knowledge wasn't accidental or gradual. It was systematic and deliberate, driven by chemical companies that needed post-war markets for their explosive manufacturing capacity. During World War II, enormous factories produced synthetic nitrogen for explosives. When peace arrived, those factories needed new purpose immediately or faced shutdown and massive financial losses. The chemical formula for explosive nitrogen and fertilizer nitrogen was nearly identical. The same Haber-Bosch process that made bombs could make fertilizer with minor modifications. Chemical companies had infrastructure, production capacity, and desperate need for customers. But they faced a fundamental problem. Millions of people had just spent 4 years learning to grow food without purchasing any inputs. Victory Gardens had demonstrated that biological nitrogen fixation through plants like white clover worked perfectly. People had direct experience with soil improvement, yield increases, and complete fertilizer independence. Chemical companies needed to erase that knowledge and create dependence on purchased products. The campaign was subtle but comprehensive. Agricultural extension offices, which received industry funding, shifted messaging away from biological fertility methods toward chemical inputs. Universities conducting agricultural research received grants specifically for studying synthetic fertilizer applications, not biological alternatives. Seed catalogs gradually reduced, then eliminated white clover offerings, replacing them with synthetic lawn fertilizer advertisements. Farming magazines, dependent on fertilizer company advertising revenue, published articles emphasizing the convenience and scientific advancement of chemical fertilizers while portraying biological methods as old-fashioned and inefficient. The term organic farming was coined and deliberately associated with low yields and impractical idealism. Even though wartime data proved otherwise, within 15 years, knowledge that had sustained agriculture for thousands of years and had just proven itself during the largest global crisis in history was successfully marginalized. A generation of farmers and gardeners emerged who genuinely believed that synthetic chemicals were necessary for productive agriculture. The biological knowledge didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it succeeded too well. Number 6. Growing your own infinite fertilizer today. Reclaiming white clover fertility from modern gardens requires no special equipment, no expensive inputs, and no complicated procedures. The plant remains exactly as effective today as during World War II because the biological processes have unchanged. Nitrogen fixation works identically, whether it's 1944 or present day. Start by sourcing white clover seed. Most garden centers don't stock it because there's minimal profit margin, but agricultural feed stores carry it for pasture applications. Purchase untreated seed, avoiding any coated with fungicides or inoculants. Pure white clover seed costs approximately $3 to $7 per pound, and 1 pound covers approximately 4,000 square feet when broadcast at light interplanting rates. For interplanting among existing vegetables, broadcast seed between rows at approximately 1 ounce per 100 square feet. Lightly rake to ensure soil contact, but don't bury deeply. Clover seed needs light for germination. Water gently to settle seed. Germination occurs in 7 to 14 days, depending on temperature and moisture. For dedicated green manure plantings, increase seeding rate to 4 to 6 ounces per 100 square feet immediately after clearing summer crops. Allow clover to grow for 6 to 8 weeks minimum before incorporating. Cut at soil level, allow 24 to 48 hours wilting time, then incorporate into top 4 to 6 inches of soil. Wait 2 to 3 weeks before planting subsequent crops to allow initial decomposition. The clover establishes as perennial ground cover in most temperate climates. It survives winter, returns each spring, and provides continuous nitrogen fixation for years from single planting. No fertilizer purchases, no dependency on supply chains, no recurring costs. Just free, abundant, perpetual fertility produced by a plant doing what it evolved to do naturally. This is what they spent decades making you forget. They didn't survive with chemicals. They didn't wait for supply chains to recover. And they didn't accept the lie that soil fertility required purchasing products from corporations. What they had was white clover, a plant so common it grew wild everywhere. A plant so effective it replaced every fertilizer they couldn't buy. A plant so threatening to future profits that it had to be systematically erased from agricultural knowledge. These weren't just gardening techniques. They were acts of biological independence. Every garden with white clover meant one less family dependent on rationed fertilizer. Every successful harvest meant proof that nature provided what corporations claimed only they could sell. And every season that clover returned, fixing more nitrogen and building richer soil, it demonstrated that the best fertilizer was never for sale at all. Today, we live in a world that seems abundant until it isn't. garden centers full of synthetic fertilizers, agricultural companies promising better results through chemicals. But underneath that appearance, the same dependency exists. You need their products, you follow their schedules, and you pay season after season for what a simple plant produces free. If you believe knowledge should be accessible, if you want independence instead of dependence, if you understand that the best solutions are often the ones they stopped teaching, then you're exactly where you need to be. White clover isn't historical curiosity. It's practical technology that works today exactly as it worked 80 years ago when it kept people alive. Subscribe now, learn what they buried, and become part of the generation that refuses to pay for what nature provides freely. Because when fertilizer prices spike and supply chains break, you'll either know how to grow your own nitrogen, or you'll learn what dependency really costs.